Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you all for joining us today for this webinar hosted by the SANCOLD Young Professionals Forum. My name is Ashley Kutsia and I'm the YPF chair at SANCOLD. It is a pleasure to welcome such a distinguished group of professionals, students, and stakeholders who share a common interest in advancing our understanding and managing dam siltation. Today's topic is the National Dam Siltation Management Program, a critical initiative to address the challenges posed by sedimentation in our dams. And we are privileged to have with us Dr. Leanne Modley, a senior lecturer from the University of Johannesburg, who will be leading today's presentation. Dr. Modley holds a PhD in environmental studies, focusing on aquatic health, and has extensive experience in water quality monitoring, freshwater ecosystems, sediment management, and environmental sustainability. Alongside her, we have experts from the University of Johannesburg, Ngeni Water, PDG Development Consultant, and the Water Research Commission, who will share their insights and findings on this crucial topic. Okay, before we begin, I would just like to remind everyone of a few housekeeping details. If you have any questions during the presentation, feel free to type them in the chat box. We will address them during the Q&A session at the end of the presentation. So this webinar is being recorded and will be made available to all registered participants. And without any further ado, please join with me in welcoming Dr. Leanne Modley and her colleagues. Dr. Modley, the floor is yours. Okay, Dr. Modley, I can hear you. You can share your screen. Okay, Dr. Modley, I can't hear you. Can anyone else hear her? Can we please just have some reactions?
I'm not able to hear her as well.
All right. Oh, we can't see your screen either. Okay, we can see your screen. I can't hear you though. Okay, we're having some technical difficulty with the sound. Sorry, we can't hear. Sorry, everyone. If you could just give us 5 minutes to get the sound. Maybe you can just leave and rejoin. Yes, thank you so much.
Are you able to hear me now, Ashley?
Yes, I can hear you now. You're welcome to share
Oh,
your screen.
okay. Um, Please let me know when you see my screen.
All right, will do. Okay, your screen is visible. Thank you. Sorry, everyone, for the delay. We will start now.
Okay. So my screen is visible to everyone, right?
No, I can't see it, but proceed. I'll keep on trying, whatever is the problem.
I'm not sure what the issue is.
People are reacting. Yes, they can see.
Okay. So I'm just going to speak about the actual strategy, and then we will go through a background. I'll give a brief background on the National Siltation Management Strategy developed by the Water Research Commission and DWS in South Africa. We will then go through the different phases of the National Siltation Management Strategy. And then I think I'll just pause a little bit for some questions, comments, suggestions, and just a short discussion. And then we'll discuss one of the phases which speaks directly to skills and development in terms of national siltation management in South Africa. Okay, is my screen full? Because I'm not sure what this live PowerPoint is.
It's kind of full. Yeah, it's good enough. We can see everything.
Okay, so just to provide a brief background for everyone on what sedimentation is and the situation that we are facing in South Africa. So it's not something that is unique to South Africa only. We've been in discussions with many of our transboundary partners, and we've learned that it's also been a situation or an issue that they are trying to deal with in their countries. But also research shows that this is a global phenomenon. So the main issue with sedimentation is the dams filling up and losing storage space. And this, of course, can be directly related to anthropogenic activities, the main one being poor land use practices, which then results in an increased sediment load into our rivers, which then end up in our reservoirs. So we all know that South Africa is a water scarce country. I think we are fighting really hard to reach those SDG 6 goals for 2030, but we do have, an added disadvantage, especially because of the fact that we are a water scarce country. So the issue of sedimentation not only has the impact on the water security goals that we are trying to reach, but it also then directly impacts the supply resilience. This then has an impact on the ecology of our river systems, which doesn't only affect the people staying in the surrounding areas, but most importantly, it affects the ecology in these rivers that we rely on also for ecosystem services. I think the biggest thing with this sedimentation is not only the supply and security in terms of our water, but the economic aspect as well. So when our dams are being filled with sediment, we are then left with no other option but to rehabilitate the dams, which of course has cost implications. Or sometimes it's gone to the extent where we can't rehabilitate it, but we now also have to construct new dams, in order to replace that lost storage. So the national siltation strategy was developed by the WRC and the DWS, as I've mentioned before. But generally, siltation is dealt with through a two-pronged approach. So firstly, we try and prevent or reduce the sediment load from the upstream catchment. This then would have a direct impact on the rate of storage loss. And then the second way of dealing with sedimentation is regaining some of the lost storage in a reservoir through dredging or other means. Of course, there's been many debates about how sustainable dredging can be, and if it is at all an option, it would be the last option. So this is generally and globally how people usually deal with sedimentation. And of course, in South Africa, before the NatSilt, there has been some discussions about using one or both of these approaches. So what would make sense, and I think this really speaks to why we are here today discussing NatSilt with all your members, is the fact that we don't just want to look at siltation issues from a scientific lens. We do want to involve engineers, we do want to involve social scientists, we do want to involve different sectors, we do want to speak to civil society as well. We do want to really make sure that it is a multidisciplinary approach and one that also includes different sectors as well. So when we look at siltation, we don't just want to look at one type of criteria, but many different types of criteria that would have a direct or indirect or cumulative impact on siltation and the issues that we are facing in South Africa. So we know, of course, that we all are so used to working in silos. We are used to looking for solutions to the same problem, but trying to figure it out on our own. So it's not really something that we commonly do, where we all get into the room and try and find solutions to some of the problems that we are facing. So we really want this NatSilt to take a different approach and, if possible, change some of the behaviors that we have all grown so accustomed to. So we want to start speaking to different sectors and also different disciplines to make sure that the strategy is, of course, a success. I think many of you will know that DWS is the owner of many of our large portfolio dams in South Africa. And of course, this is directly linked to the socioeconomic well-being of the country. So they've developed this with the Water Research Commission in order to guide, advise, and ensure effective siltation management and related improved storage capacity of dams in South Africa. So who is actually involved in this siltation management? So initially, who we thought would be involved would, of course, be the dam owner, as well as different operators, as well as the catchment managers, because, of course, if there is any land use activities upstream or anthropogenic activities that would increase the sediment load, they would be able to assist or help identify where that is, where it's coming from, and help us really pinpoint the source. So in South Africa, we do have quite a bit of data on sedimentation in our dams, and I think our database is quite robust, especially if you compare it to other countries, specifically our neighboring countries. The main issue in South Africa is actually finding the source. So in this regard, these catchment managers can help us pinpoint those sources so that we can help accelerate the process of finding solutions to the issues that we find ourselves in, as well as environmental managers, and then, of course, land managers or owners who would then be directly involved in these anthropogenic impacts. We know that it wouldn't only be landowners, as in civil society, but we would also have different industries, such as mines, and I think many of the engagements that we've had, we've been advised to speak to the sand mining community, and find out what their approach would be to this, and just try and find out, based on the roles that they're playing, if they are at all interested in forming part of the solution. So we do have many different people that we think should be involved in really dealing with siltation, but that is part of the reason why we're here. So we envision the dam owner, catchment managers, environmental managers, and land managers playing the biggest role. But I did previously mention that we do want to take a different approach, where we look at different disciplines, different sectors, and different criteria to really strengthen the strategy. So we know, of course, in South Africa, we have this mode of service delivery, which in our policy even, we are committed to providing new livelihood opportunities for historically disadvantaged people and communities. So when we speak about a NatSilt strategy, we're not just trying to see how it would benefit government or benefit the dam owners, but also benefit the community who rely on this water, but also rely on this water for a sort of livelihood. So we're looking at community benefits as well, and trying to understand how the community can benefit from a NatSilt plan directly and indirectly. And I think this is the basis of this NatSilt strategy, where we're really trying to have a positive influence on the communities that operate in and around these dams. So the National Siltation the National NatSilt Management Strategy has been known to have many different benefits. So we are trying to look at the strategy and see how we can also find other benefits, and see which benefits we can also strengthen through strengthening the strategy. It can be divided into, firstly, the systemic benefits, where we know there is this need to invest in really creating awareness, because sometimes there are these poor land use practices, not only because people have no other way of doing it, but because they know of nothing else. So there's a real issue in terms of awareness and knowledge in these areas. And I think one of the things that we really need to do is see how we can educate communities on better land management practices. We've also seen that there can be more storage capacity. So of course, the main aim of this NatSilt is really related to water security and resilience, and improving and increasing the supply of the water in the dams, but also speaking to more stable and more fertile soils, which would then lead to less muddy flooding and erosion. There's also the benefit of higher levels of carbon sequestration in the soils. And then, of course, we do have those indirect benefits, which speaks to more fertile soils, improved water quality, and of course, public sector attention to the rural and peri-urban development. One big aspect of the NatSilt is also the employment opportunities that can be created from these programs. And I think in a country like South Africa, with an unemployment rate of almost 40%, programs like these really do help us find some avenues for employing not only young people, but people in disadvantaged communities who would not have access to these opportunities if there was nothing like the NatSilt. We also saw some direct benefits in the sink zone, where again we have employment in the infrastructure management programs, and of course access to removed sediment for agriculture and building. So there are a few benefits that we've spoken about, also with the national DWS provincial offices, but also with our transboundary partners, in terms of how this NatSilt can actually work for them. I think one of the biggest questions that we've been asked is who is going to fund it. So we have also done research on public and private avenues of funding for the NatSilt. In terms of prevention, because this is of course what we are trying to do, prevention is always better than cure. And I think starting with the program, whether you have issues or not, is always the best way to go. In terms of prevention, we have seen some avenues of funding from the Republic of South Africa infrastructure grants. There are also some land care grants, and then your natural resource management grants from DEFF. And then the mine rehabilitation fund. So this is from, and many of you would know that work in environmental consulting, that our laws have changed significantly in terms of mine rehabilitation, where you then have to put the money up front. So how can this help us achieve the goals of the NATSIL to make sure that there are no poor land use practices, and if there are any, so we would try and prevent them as much as possible, but if they are unavoidable, how can we then use some of these funds to make sure that the impact on the reservoirs is not as bad, thus leading to a loss of storage? For management, we've seen the water resource management charge as well as the water resource development charge can really assist in helping us fund the NATSILT. Sometimes even the environmental levy or raw water tariff. In terms of private, there are loans from commercial banks, especially in terms of climate mitigation and adaptation, specifically focusing on water security. As I mentioned previously, the biggest issue with siltation is the impact that it has on our water security as an already water scarce country. Development financing from the African Development Bank, as well as DBSA. So there has been some engagement at different levels with these banks, and they have given us some insights on how we can actually use their financing to finance either the prevention or to finance the rehabilitation of siltation. Private landowners sometimes also have funds that we can tap into, climate financing, like I've just mentioned, carbon credits, which is something that we see more often in South Africa. And then again, the mine rehabilitation funds, and something that many companies are trying to tap into now is the environmental, social, and governance aspect of the business, where they are relying heavily on impacting the community in a positive way and contributing to this through their corporate social responsibility. So the main vision of this NATSILT is really to improve livelihoods and water security through a collaborative, sustainable, and inclusive catchment and dam management plan. So we have different goals that we are using to get to this. The first goal, of course, is the collaborative source to dam governance, where we're not only looking at, for instance, the land manager, but looking at how the dam owner, how the municipality, how other members of civil society, how the industry can all come together to strengthen that collaborative governance to make sure that we have good results in terms of the source to dam. The second one would be quantification of the source to dam costs and benefits. Like I mentioned, there are many debates around sustainable dredging, and of course this would be the last option, but it is always advisable to do that cost benefit just to see what would really work for us in this situation. And then, of course, the third goal would be to finance source to dam management interventions. I think we all know that it would, we all have good intentions, but in order to really make sure that it's implemented correctly and that there is action behind our words, we will need funding at some point. And then, of course, making sure that we have that integrated source to dam sedimentation management. Really integrated into the department, because I think, as you know, DWS really needs to take the forefront of this. They really need to make sure that we can implement it, that it's feasible, that it's practical enough for them to deal with as a department. Not that it would only be their responsibility, but they would play one of the biggest roles. And then, of course, developing adequate resources to support the NATSILT implementation. So this slide is a little bit packed and unclear, but it really just speaks to what the vision is and how we plan on reaching that vision. So here, I think essentially what we need from you is just to tell us who else you think should be in these conversations, who else do you think would play a role in helping us really reach those 5 goals, and also reaching the vision, and making sure that whatever we are trying to do is practical and feasible enough to really implement. So the net salt strategy is a theoretical strategy, and I think they've worked on it for 2 or 3 years and would now like to implement it. But of course, sometimes what looks good in theory is not always feasible or practical in real life. And I think that's really one of the key points from many of the engagements with the DWS national officers in terms of how this will really be implemented. So we do know that there's been a real transition in terms of that dam management, where before we had no management at all. And then we started dealing with everything with a case-by-case study. So there was some dam siltation management, but it would only be, for example, Valbedacht, where they've lost almost 80% of their storage because of siltation. So it was not looking at the country as a whole, or looking at how we can prevent other dams from experiencing the same issues, but looking at how we can deal with the current situation at the dam, which, for example, has now lost more than 80% of their storage. We then moved to land management, where we started realizing that inadequate land management practices really would have a negative impact on the catchment, which then would have an even worse impact on the reservoir in terms of storage space, leading then to water security issues, water supply issues, and then obviously impacting the resilience of the country. And now we've moved towards a collaborative to source dam sedimentation management plan, where we are looking at not just working with government or DWS, but involving academia, involving industry, involving civil society, involving the other landowners, but also speaking to people from different sectors and disciplines to make sure that this plan is really implementable. So how this issue has been dealt with at a global level has been really to understand that we do have an issue. So coming to terms with the fact that there's an issue now in South Africa with siltation, how do we deal with it? So how can we really define this for our country? And I think we through our engagements, we've seen with our transboundary partners that whatever's happening in South Africa is almost always either happening already in their country, or they are moving towards it. So, defining it really would mean that we define it as South Africa and then hear what our counterparts say about how you actually define siltation in your country before we get to that definition, so that we can publish the definition and everyone understands really what is siltation. The next step would then be to have that shared understanding and issue agreement. So how do we really get this into the departments? Are people interested? Many of the members from DWS have said that it's just an added KPI that many people don't really want to deal with. So we're trying to find a way of how we can really disseminate knowledge really and make sure everyone understands how important this is, but also then embed it into what's already existing. So if you look at your existing national water resource management strategies, how do we then embed this into that, so it's not seen as just another task that people have to do, which is not really incentivized? How do we get people to incorporate the national strategy into what they are currently doing, and making sure that, you know, there is policy that requires them to do it, or there is some sort of legislation or guidelines that would really hold people to implementing this strategy. And then, of course, this would lead us to that collaborative source to dam sedimentation management, which is the end goal. So the checklist that we are using, I'm not sure how clear the slide is to everyone because it looks really small on my side. Is it clear for everyone?
It is quite small, but
Okay.
yeah, maybe if you talk us through it, we will be able to follow because it's small, but it's not illegible.
Okay, so just to talk you through it, what we are trying to do with the NatSalt is, of course, we know that there's this issue. We are trying to then find some activists, you know, that can help us really make this issue known to everyone so that it becomes highlighted in every meeting, and also in policy, also in guidelines, also in strategies, so that people understand that there is actually an issue and one that we really need to start dealing with sooner rather than later. We then need to start defining the issue. So here again, we are looking for individual champions that will start help sharing those concerns and ideas, and then make sure that we can really examine the cause and the impact at different levels, and then start looking for solutions. So that is similar to what we are doing here, where you will, of course, then tell us if you think the strategy is something that can be implemented. If, as for example, an engineer, you think it is too much work, you think there's other people that need to be brought to the table, or you think that perhaps the strategy can be a little bit more practical, which would make it easier to implement. We then want to start developing that collective voice where we all, you know, speak with the same voice. So we know that we work in silos. We know that we all want to have our voices heard, but how do we really come to that point where we speak with a collective voice and make sure that this process is as inclusive as possible, where we can really start developing solutions and experimenting with those solutions, and then leading us towards the practical guidance. We then want to start looking at knowledge dissemination, which is part of what we'll be discussing later. So we want to develop influential champions where they can help us build the broad support and make sure that the solutions that we currently have are more advanced, and of course demonstrate at scale. The first step, and I think in the transition phase, this is probably the most difficult one, is the policy and practice diffusion. So how do we really make sure that this finds its way into policy? How do we make sure that it's legislated? How do we make sure that we can really connect it to what is already existing in the South African legislation? And then, of course, do capacity building to make sure that everyone understands what this is and how we are going to implement it. The last phase would then be to embed the practice. So this, we are planning on doing this through multi-stakeholder networks, through guiding consistent application, through really working with monitoring and evaluation to make sure it's not just another strategy that sits on the shelves, but one that's really implemented and one that really has a positive impact on the country as a whole, but also provides that benefits that I mentioned previously in terms of employment, in terms of water security, water supply, as well as resilience. And then looking at standardization and refinement. Like I said, we do know that many of our neighboring partners are suffering with the same issue. And from our engagements, many of them do not have any tools or strategies developed yet. So if we can standardize this and refine it, it could be something that we share with our neighboring partners as well. Just because South Africa has really made great strides in developing these strategies and also developing tools that are helpful in terms of dam siltation. So I think I'm just going to discuss what the targeted outcomes are for the NATSIL program, and then I'll hand over to Prof. Rampedi and Audrey to speak a little bit about the skills programs that we are offering to make sure that we really inform people about this, create the awareness, and do the knowledge dissemination to help us reach the goals of the NATSIL program. So we want to, of course, make sure that there's collaboration at different levels. We want to make sure that this is coordinated. And then we really want to communicate it to as many stakeholders as possible to make sure that the implementation of key actions is a smooth and seamless process. So some of the main players that are important for this is, of course, government-linked research institutions like CSIR, ARC, some of the other organizations as well. I think GIZ being one of them. Government departments, of course, we want to make sure that all government departments are on board with this. We would also like to just inform everyone that although it's a water issue, it's not just something DWA should deal with, because of course, Department of Forestry and Fisheries would also have activities that would impact the water security and the water supply, GDART as well as other government departments such as DMR in terms of the sand mining. For government link implementers and other implementers, we're really looking at different disciplines and how they can help us make sure that this is implemented as seamlessly as possible. So what is the way forward? There is, of course, different phases that WRC is doing to really meet those goals and really finalizing this NATSIL strategy. SP1 would be the strategy development, which has been done. We've also looked at dam engineering and socio-ecological systems, which if we do have another opportunity, we would like to share more details on that as well. Sustainable dam dredging, which I know will still be tested. And then, of course, the training and capacity development, which Prof. Rampedi and Audrey will speak to. So we are doing the testing and implementation. Of course, the programs have already been developed that will be offered at UJ from August 2024. But the strategy itself is still being tested and still needs to be implemented, which should take place in 2025. The last phase, of course, would then be to finalize. So, yeah, I know I've said a mouthful. I'm going to stop over here and see if there's any questions, if there's anything that anyone would like to suggest or comment. Of course, it would have been nice to really go through the strategy in greater detail, but we just wanted to introduce everyone to it, and hopefully you can give us some insights or suggestions or comments on what you've seen in terms of how we can really strengthen the strategy going forward and make sure it's feasible and easier to implement. Thank you.
All right, we have one hand up. I'm going to unmute you for now, and then you can state your question. Okay, the hand has gone down. Okay, yes, thank you, Dr. Modley. All right, it's back. Okay, your mic has been allowed. You can unmute yourself and ask your question.
Yes, thank you very much for a very interesting presentation. My name is Stanley Mutua. I just wanted to find out a few things. The first one being on the dam itself. It seems this strategy concentrates on the downstream aspects, which is the existence of the dam already. but there are other aspects that may need to be taken into account, which, for example, would include the geomorphology of the area, the size of the storage versus the catchment, the location of dam and other structures, which tends to disturb the river dynamics. You mentioned also perhaps the sand abstraction aspects and the water rights, but I'm a bit worried that there's no emphasis on the upstream activities, which is the location of the dam itself and the catchment size. Would you want to comment on that?
Yes, please. Thank you so much for your question. So the strategy does look at the entire catchment. So we're looking at what is being done upstream and how we can work with what's happening upstream. And of course, what's happening downstream is the impact of what's happening upstream. The dam strategy, the net salt that I've just presented to you is the strategy that needs to be implemented at the department level. But there is a storage sustainability tool that has been already developed by the WRC, which goes hand in hand with this NatSalt plan. So the storage sustainability tool looks at all of the aspects that you've just mentioned. So the geomorphology, the catchment, the size of the storage, the location, all of that is information that will be given to you through the storage sustainability tool. So what that tool does then is help you determine the sustainability of your dam. And if your dam is unsustainable, for example, it then gives you solutions or suggestions on how to improve the situation. So the strategy basically just focuses on how we implement this as a department with different stakeholders. But there is a specific tool that can be used for the dam siltation, which takes into consideration all surrounding activities as well as the geomorphology, size of the dam and location, etc. Does that answer your question, Ms. Sally?
Yeah, partly, yes, it answers. But if I can add one more aspect, the Department of Agriculture seems to be a key player. And yes, perhaps you have included it by just saying the government departments. I would think that it's a very, very key player in all this.
Yes, definitely. We have included them. I think the biggest challenge as well is trying to get all the government departments into one room and then finding out a way for them to collaborate beyond just signing an MOU. So making sure there's really that collaborative effort, but that everyone contributes meaningfully and really sticks to helping us reach those goals instead of blaming and pointing fingers. So I must admit that has been one of our challenges with getting this strategy strengthened through stakeholder engagement.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
All right, thank you. We'll give over to Prof. Rampedi for his presentation.
Thank you very much for the opportunity. Dr. Modley, my presentation, is it with regard to the SLP or with respect to the strategy? Dr. Modley? Dr. Modley, just wanted to find out if is it about strategy or is it about the SLP module that I'm responsible for?
In regards to the SLP, Prof. Rampedi.
Great.
Thank you.
Yeah, good evening, everyone. So Dr. Modley has already given us a background of where this dam siltation program is coming from. We've got a very big problem in terms of water security because the dams that we have are being, full of sediment, And this sediment is a function of the land uses upstream. It is a function of geology, it's a function of climate that is happening in those areas. As a result, apart from the strategy, one of the mechanisms through which we can create capacity and technical know-how is to educate the different stakeholders that we found on this catchment. And it is for this reason that UJ has partnered with the WRC and other stakeholders to create this short learning program. So I'm just going to share with you some of the highlights that pertain to one of the modules that is known as the Dam Siltation Network and Partnership Coordinator. So there are various modules in this proposed short learning program, which is actually now going to be offered in the second semester. So I'm just going to take you through some of the highlights there. This present short learning program that we have designed, it is aiming to enable the learners and other stakeholders to operate competently as a dam siltation network and partnership coordinator. The program that we are putting forward is pitched at an NQF level 5, and it has got about 56 credits. This one in particular that I'm talking about is one of the courses that has been offered. So this one is a Dam Siltation Network and Partnership Coordinator. So such a person is expected to perform the following tasks on the catchments that are harboring the dams. Firstly, we see the role of a coordinator as somebody who will have the know-how how to establish and manage existing dam siltation network communications and initiatives, because communication is very key, and even building awareness among the different stakeholders is very, very important. We see also the role of a coordinator being somebody who will facilitate further networks and partnership for the good land use practices at a catchment level, with in keeping with relevant legislative and policy framework. One of the participants has already asked that, are we not considering some of the aspects or land uses that are located upstream? So land use practices are very, very, very important, and they can be seen as presenting a risk or a threat to the sustainability of our dams. So these are some of the expectations that a person with the qualification of a coordinator will be able to do that. So the proposed SLP is developed to cater for current technical staff or technicians who are working in the different areas that pertain to the maintenance and management of South African dams. The eligible learners here, we're talking about people who are likely to be enrolling for this module. These are people with an NQF level 3 qualification with at least 3 years experience in community development and stakeholder engagement. Thus, the entry level professionals are people who will be specializing in this operation and management of land uses around the structures, such as dams. And the same applies to individuals who are already having a school academic environment. So let's look into the content of this course. It talks about key role stakeholders in the dam siltation strategy. There are various participants here. There are various key role players in improving dam siltation, and they include the following ones, and there are many others, one of which is the dam owner or the dam operators. Most of the dams are owned by the national government or the provincial government and the department, the relevant department of DWS. So these operators have got a very, very key role to play in the maintenance of the infrastructure that is housing these dams. Another important stakeholder here is the catchment managers, and this is coming from the National Water Act, where it is making provision for the establishment of catchment management agencies. So the catchment management agencies, those are forums that are established on different drainage basins, and their goal is to make sure that the land users do not reach their capacity, do not actually destroy, environmental quality, thus leading to the generation of sediment. Another important key stakeholder here are the environmental managers. Now, the environmental managers are being hired by government departments. Many of them are in private consulting. So these are very important stakeholders in that these are people who are applying sustainability consideration in the making of decisions with regards to the projects that have been proposed by developers. Another important stakeholder here are the land managers, who are the owners of land. And we also included the local communities. And local communities, some of them are involved in farming, subsistence farming, some of them are involved in commercial farming, and other different types of land issues such as tourism and recreation. We also include other beneficiaries that are involved in the water sector catchment and management. So what is the role of a dam siltation network and partnership coordinator? So for the students or for the learners who will enroll for this module, for this specific module, the coordinator is somebody who will act as a facilitator and a change agent to support stakeholder participation by establishing and maintaining networks and partnerships, and by building a discourse for dam siltation management within the broader spectrum of stakeholders and networks for dam siltation. So what we are saying here is that it is not enough to come with high-tech technologies solution. We also have to leverage communication. We have to leverage relationships and partnerships between the different role players so that the knowledge is being shared and there's a community of practice that has been developed. Therefore, the purpose of this coordinator is to foster catchment scale interventions, such as the adoption of sustainable land use practices and erosion management intervention that will support the aim of reducing dam siltation across the basins in South Africa. Now, what follows here is just an overview of a brief description of the content of the specific module. We have got the following types of content here. Firstly, is to understand the various tools and processes that can be used for identifying relevant stakeholders that are akin to catchment siltation management. And another important topic that is covered in this model is how to develop relationships between government entities, public bodies, businesses in order to promote community engagement in siltation management outcomes referred to in the National Siltation Management Strategy. Another content here looks into understanding the aims, the benefits, and the challenges of collaboration, integration, and coordination at a catchment scale. Another important content of this model is how do we develop programs, sustainable programs that are aimed at promoting collaboration, integration, and coordination at a catchment scale. And lastly, the module aims to establish the national, regional, and global regulatory frameworks that are very important to facilitate coordination, collaboration, and integration among the various stakeholders in the catchment siltation management. The next slide is going to give us a little bit more information on the tools and the processes that are involved. So one of the important learning outcomes here is to demonstrate an understanding of the requisite tools and processes that are used for identifying stakeholders for catchment siltation management. And also the learners should be able to describe such tools and processes in how they can be applied to enhance catchment siltation management. In terms of these tools and processes for identifying stakeholders here, just briefly, we're talking about brainstorming sessions. We are talking about mapping stakeholder concerns and interest. We're talking about being able to understand stakeholder expectations and impacts. Stakeholder identification and mobilization can also happen through negotiations and can also happen through the development of partnerships and collaboration. We will also see stakeholder identification as the grouping of various stakeholders. There are different layers of stakeholders. We've got community-based organizations, we've got government departments, we've got statutory organizations, we've got non-governmental organizations, we've got traditional stakeholders. All of these people are playing a very important role in the sustainability of the catchments that are housing these dams. So these are just some of the tools and processes that we're going to be using there. In terms of conducting stakeholder information needs analysis, what we are going to share with the student is how to perform document analysis and even conducting surveys that can help us to understand stakeholder needs assessment. So I'm just giving you the highlights of some of the content that will be imparted in this course. Then thirdly, we've got a focus on fostering stakeholder relationships and partnerships in line with the national siltation management strategies. So here the learning outcomes is to help them to explain the different steps that are necessary to facilitate stakeholder participation, to describe the process of building and maintaining healthy stakeholder and partnership relationships, and to help them identify and discuss the various relationships that exist between role players relevant for dam siltation. And the learners would also be able to discuss how to create an effective communication systems. So some of these learning outcomes, they can be achieved through, for example, making use of a stakeholder participating spectrum. With such a spectrum, we'll be able to identify the different groups of stakeholders. We'll be able to come up with the different methods that we can engage them. And of course, depending on their level of awareness and knowledge about dam siltation issues. We can also do that by identifying stakeholder needs on every catchment, downstream, on upstream. We've got farmers, commercial farmers, we've got recreational facilities, we've got tourism facilities, and all the different types of land issues that we find on this. So this fostering of relationship can be done by trying to look into the stakeholder needs that we find in that specific region. And we will also communicate with stakeholders based on their information needs, and relationships can also be strengthened when we can share critical information that will inform their land use behavior. Furthermore, in this program, we also going to share with the learners the aims, the benefits, and the challenges of collaboration, integration, and coordination within the context of dam siltation management. We've got various learning outcomes there. Number one, for example, we'll be explaining the different dam siltation management stages in the process of establishing networks and relationships. There are various steps there that one can put into, that one can suggest. One of which is siltation prevention. As Dr. Motley has said, prevention is better than cure. So the first step to improve the sustainability of, and especially for new dams, what can be done to prevent that? And then another important step, once that is done, another important step will be to make sure that there is effective and efficient resource utilization. That is the second step. And another important step is to identify any risk and to suggest what can be done to mitigate the magnitude and the significance of those risks. So I'm just sharing with you the highlight that would form part of the learning content here. We've got the learning outcomes that involve delineating and explaining the aims and collaboration, integration and coordination. And here, all of these aims are very important for integrated decision making to inform, practical outcomes. One of the learning outcomes under this heading is to explain and summarize the benefits of collaboration, the benefits of coordination and collaboration. So in this instance, we will be distinguishing between the direct, indirect, and cumulative benefits that will come from optimum dam siltation strategy. The last one here is to outline, how do we outline and discuss the challenges that are linked to collaboration, integration, and coordination. And here there are various challenges that we'll have got to deal with here. This, for example, involves resource constraints. There are financial resources, there are human resources, there are technology resources, there are constraints in the deployment of these technologies. There's also a big challenge in implementing legal and regulatory requirements, especially in South Africa, given the proliferation of environmental laws and regulations that we've got. Another challenge has got to do with institutional arrangements. By constitutional arrangements, we mean those organizations, those institutions, those policies, and those different mechanisms that will help us to achieve optimum dam siltation strategy. Yeah, okay, those are the different outcomes under that topic. And lastly, in this program, in this specific module in particular, we will also outline the national, regional, and global regulatory frameworks to facilitate coordination, collaboration, and integration among different stakeholders in catchment siltation management. And this will be done at different levels. At national levels here, at national level here, the frameworks that will be designed will be derived from provisions, international policies, laws, and regulations and standards in South Africa. And at the regional level, here we'll be looking into frameworks that can be derived from understanding what are the regional protocols and what are the agreements for transboundary collaboration and setting standards. And then when we come to the global regulatory frameworks here we look into relevant global conventions and international best practices. Now, all of this will help us to achieve integrated catchment management protocol, and this will involve coordination, collaboration, and partnerships. In a way, this will give rise to integrated catchment management, and this would allow for integrated practices to emerge through social learning. So in short, this is what we have in mind in terms of this specific module that is going to be offered in the short learning program. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I think we have one more presentation by Audrey. I don't know how long it is because we're a bit over time. But yes.
I'm going to unshare this one.
Thank you.
Thank you. Before Audrey, I see a hand is up. Stanley?
No, I've no comment at the moment.
Thank you.
Sorry.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, Audrey, are you going to share your screen? Or is that the end of the webinar? Please let me know.
Are you able to see my screen, Ashley? Can you see the presentation?
Yes, I can see a presentation. It's not gone over into presentation viewer yet, but the presentation is visible. Thank you.
All right, I'm just going to put it on the presentation mode. Is it on the presentation mode?
No. Yeah, you'll have to share your entire screen and not just the window if you want to put it that way. Otherwise, you'll have to work from the presentation.
Okay, can I proceed?
Just go to the next slide.
Next slide.
No, so it's not working. So you need to share your whole screen and not just the window.
Okay, let me just escape and stop sharing, then share the entire screen. Are you able to see the entire screen? Ashley?
I can see your entire screen now. You can start with your presentation. Hopefully, yeah, it will go
Can you
over.
see the presentation?
Yes.
Okay, I'm just gonna put it on the presentation mode. Is that fine now?
Yes, we can see everything. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ashley, and good evening, everyone. Thank you for this opportunity. I'm just going to be taking you through another important element of this a program which speaks to the siltation process controller, and which is broken down into two. We have got the theory component and we've got the practical component. Mine is going to be quite short. So just to go to the gist of it, in terms of the siltation process controller theory 1, it will be delivered at an NQF level 4. And in terms of the total hours that that will need to be dedicated to this program is 42 hours, which will be divided into the contact learning sessions and the independent learning, and also there will be the assessment element to it, and it will take a duration of 3 months. And the mode of teaching, it will be blended. By blended, we mean that in terms of the theory part that will be delivered virtually, and will have the practical element which will be done face to face as we go to the site, different sites which will be chosen for this process control element. And the purpose of this SLP, it's basically to ensure that the learner is able to to operate the dam siltation processes, and after they have completed all the 3 process controller SLPs, and the learner also is expected to operate the segment processes at the dam, with the purpose of course reducing the amount of sediment buildup in the dams in accordance with the operational procedures that will be used, and in accordance with the statutory and regulatory requirements. And further to that, it is expected of the learner that they'll be able to implement the operating rules, obviously under supervision, and they should be able to monitor the processes and also provide some reporting, which will then be used in terms of decision making and management of those dams going forward. And in terms of the description of the contents, we are saying that through this theory 1, the process description will include the characteristics and sources of sediments and factors influencing the quality. They will also look into inspection, operation, and control of silt treatment processes and disposal processes, as well as the equipment at the dam, and also the equipment that will be used for the different process control element that will be applied. We'll look into fundamentals of hydraulics, the dredging and the routing, and also the sediment treatment after those sediments have been removed from the dams. And in terms of the learning units, the theory 1 comprises of 4 learning units, and each learning unit comprises of the different outcomes. Without going into that, like for an example, we have under learning unit 2, I had Prof. Rampedi talking about the element of integrated waste resource management. So we also have that part as well. And looking into theory 2, this also will be delivered at NQF level 4, and the hours required will be 42 hours, and it will also take 3 months to complete. We will also here be using the blended mode of teaching, where the face-to-face part will be done at the actual dams, and the theory part will be delivered virtually. And the purpose of this particular theory 2 SLP is the aim is to enable the learner to operate the dam siltation process controller. After completing all these 3, they should be able to operate the dam, and the process controller is expected to operate sediment processes at the dam, with the purpose of obviously also reducing those sediments built up in the dams. They should be able to follow the necessary standard operating procedures that are there in terms of the operation, and they should also be able to follow the statutory and regulatory requirements. And the element also of implementing the operating rules will be done under supervision. They should be able, there will be some monitoring, and they should also be able to put together the reports which will assist in terms of decision making and management of the dams going forward. And the description, brief description of the content in terms of the theory 2 is to say inspection, operation, and control of the silt treatment processes and disposal processes and the equipment that will be used, the fundamentals of hydraulic strategy. So the theory 1 and theory 2 are more or less the same. You see, they also speak to the sediment treatment and also the dredging processes that are going to be used. Leanne touched on this, and inspection and control of silt drying processes as well. And these are the learning units are also for, and the outcomes of theory 2 in terms of these learning units are also stated there. Then we have the practical element. Under the practical element, this will also be under NQF level 4, and the hours that will be required for this practical element is 46 hours. Also, the duration will take 3 months, and the theory element will be done virtually. And in terms of now going to do the practical work, this will be done at the actual dams. And the purpose of the practical element, the SLP aims to enable the learner to operate the dam siltation process controller after they've completed the 3 SLPs, and the learner will be expected to operate the sediment processes at the dam with the purpose of obviously reducing the buildup of those sediments. And in terms of the brief description of the content for this one, we'll be looking at dredging processes and the technologies that are going to be used, and we'll also be looking at inspection and control of silt drying processes. And in terms of the learning outcomes, the practical element comprises of five learning outcomes, with each outcome having, with each learning unit having its own outcomes. Learning unit 1, the outcome is to say to inspect, operate, and control physical processes and equipment within a controlled dam environment or within a simulated environment that will be resembling the siltation processes and equipment. Learning unit 2 will be focusing on inspecting, operating, and controlling, as well as disposal processes and equipment within a controlled dam siltation, or where we need to be putting together a simulated environment. We'll also do that. In terms of learning unit 3, the outcome will be to practice and apply the skills relating to the sampling and testing of the silt. Learning unit 4, it will be, the outcome is to ensure that this data collection, analysis, and presentation. And learning unit 5, the outcome is will be to ensure that there's operated, automated processes, control systems, and computer equipment within a simulated environment resembling dam operations and equipment. And this is the long and the short of it. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you everyone who has attended and who has stuck with us up until now. I know we're quite a bit over time. I'm really thankful to Dr. Motley, Prof. Rampedi, and Audrey for their presentations. It was very insightful, and we're happy to see that there are some significant contributions to this NATSIL program taking place. And if anyone is interested in those training courses, please feel free to contact any of the presenters. I just want to hear if there is any questions. Anyone wants to raise their hand, please do so now. All right, Mr. Shamali, you are welcome to unmute yourself and ask your question or make your statement.
Thank you to all the presenters for an excellent presentations. Ashley, I would just like to share a very insightful and short story. You know, if you take the perimeter around Johannesburg, it has hundreds and hundreds of kilometers of watercourses and streams. And with the mines in the area, there's a lot of, from the tailings storage facilities, any erosion there, even if those have been rehabilitated, it goes into those streams. But if we come to a particular stream or watercourse, we've been dealing with a number of ponds and dams in that area. And what is particularly annoying and frustrating is the lack of willingness and interest of particularly G.E, that's the Gauteng Department of Rural Development Environment. We have one particular case where the watercourse is about 5 kilometers long, and for the past decade, the local One Residents Association has a full-time environmental officer who looks after 13 parks, but in fact this particular one through which this watercourse goes, it flows into the Yukskay. The soils are very erodible. It goes through areas, high recreational areas. In fact, the soils that they black type soil, highly erodible, cohesional soils. It's they're sort of soils where if you walk through a park, you find mole holes there. So that gives you an indication of the erodibility. But for a number of years, the poor environmental manager has been trying to repair the banks or these watercourses, and he has been restricted to one of these particularly poor regulations that he can only move 5 cubic meters of material at a time. In other words, bring in 5 cubic meters of material to do watercourse or river rehabilitation works. Now 5 cubic meters is if you take the cube root of 5, it's a block of material 1.709 by 1.709 by 1.709 meters. So if he exceeds that to do quite a few hundreds of watercourse, he can't do his work. So there has to be repeated to's and fro's to get exemptions or licenses, etc. But so the way he beats this, and I think it will interest everyone, how he takes on the 5 cubic meters is any trees or branches or dry sticks and leaves that have fallen down, that are along the watercourse that falls in, he tries to repair that erosion with those. Well, now everyone will know that there are a lot of voids in dry vegetation, so the next rains that come down, before the watercourse even flows, storm rainfall will go through that vegetation and it'll just erode further and further. So to all present, I'm just giving you an indication of where, now I'm not a DAMN exclamation engineer, I'm a dam engineer, but in our work we deal with dam aspects, environmental aspects, social aspects, etc., etc. And this is particularly annoying when you've got to come, say, 6 years with this sort of problem, where a government department who should, and you've pointed out there, you mentioned, so one of the presenters mentioned D.E, they're a main role player, and this should be addressed. So it's not a very good report, but that's fact. And then 2 other points. If you take a country to the north, Zimbabwe, they've got what they call agricultural extension officers who work through the catchments and construct erosion protection structures. I think they had those with the Department of Agriculture here in South Africa. And one of our most successful programs, in fact, in the firm I work with, we've got a technologist who has 13 years experience in wetland rehabilitation work. And that's been done over the last 13 to say 20 years. He's been involved with those. And these wetland rehabilitation works have done wonders for those watercourses and catchments. Naturally, not every watercourse has a wetland there, but many of them have reed beds, etc., downstream. So all in all, I'm just passing on a collective of experiences, ideas, etc., etc. Thank you for your time, and thank you to all those who've patiently listened.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chimoli. Is there anyone who would like to react to his statement? Okay, we have clapping hands. All right, thank you. Thank you so much. We will take that into consideration further. Are there any other hands? All right, then with that, I'm concluding this webinar. Thank you so much for everyone who participated and who listened. I'm just taking 2 minutes of your time to just do some advertising for SANCOLD. We have short courses coming up just before the conference on the 4th of November and the 5th of November at the Wanderers Club, which is the same place as the conference is being held. So if you're interested in taking part in this course, it's a slope stability on tailing